I am.
How are you?
I can start with the roll.
Yep.
Okay, Teddy, you're here. Yvonne,
I'm here.
Nolan. He was having some connectivity issues, I guess. We'll move on. Steve Fensky,
Good morning.
Steve Georgie,
Good
Jason Hollanday,
morning.
Mark Johnson,
Good morning, I'm here.
Brian Crambier,
Good morning, present.
Micah Myers,
Good morning, here.
Phil Stahlberger. He'll be joining us at 10:45 today. Teresa Sunday,
I'm here.
and Jim Wycombe and Paul Wirtz could not make it today, and Dave Wolf.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, roll is done.
Okay, thank you, Carol. All right, well, good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a great summer and good finish to the summer. Looks like, again, I said earlier, be a beautiful week, so hopefully get a chance to enjoy some more of the sunshine before, obviously, winter's coming, right, as usual. So, got a good agenda this morning. It won't be too packed. At 10 after the hour here in a few minutes, we'll have Scott Marquardt from the Southwest Initiative Foundation come and talk to us a little about economic development and broadband deployment in greater Minnesota. I think he has about 10 to 15 minutes of remarks, and then hopefully the material can present to us all some good conversation and dialogue, good opportunity to ask some questions and even some discussion amongst us. That will be, it might end a little bit earlier than 10:45, but at the moment we've got it scheduled for 10:45. From that, we will also have Bernadine Joselyn, who is an outgoing member of the task force. We want to give her a few minutes sort of to address this group and have some discussion there. After Bernadine's remarks and discussion, we'll take a break for about 15 minutes, and then we'll get back together. And at that point, we'll have Diane Wells come on and give us the normal update on Office of Broadband development. From that, we'll transition to a discussion on Minnesota broadband maps. As a result, obviously, of the funding available now, there's a lot of effort going on around the maps and looking at sort of where areas are being considered and all those types of things. So Jennifer Frost, who's the grant administrator from OBD, will be on, and we should have a good discussion at that point. From that, the last couple items will be just the discussions on the subgroups of just sort of where are we. So just brief updates. We won't go too much into deep, at least at this meeting. We'll probably go a little bit deeper at future meetings on maybe some of the thoughts, some initial recommendations from the various subgroups that we put forth to the general or to the full task force. And then I'll sort of end with a few comments at the end. I see Scott's on, which is great to have him back with us as we think about sort of our next report at the end of this year. So this is about the time in which we engage Scott, and I'll let him kind of talk to us about a little bit about the plan for the rest of the year and how he's going to engage with both the subgroups and the full task force. Probably very similar to last year, but also good opportunity to talk about what we learned from last year and what changes we may want to make. And then at that point, I'll just be open to public comments, any other business that anybody else wants to bring up, and we should be able to wrap up, I guess, somewhere around noon. So that's the agenda for the day, and hopefully, again, we'll have plenty of time for conversation, particularly at the end if we want to have additional discussions about other topics. But with that, I think we can into it. Scott, I see that you're on. Scott Marquardt. So, do we want to turn it over to you for your initial remarks?
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah. I'm the 320 number 2. I'm just going to talk through the phone just in case, ironically, I'm on a broadband conversation, but I'm going to talk through the phone anyway. Appreciate the chance to be on here, and thank you, Carol and Scott Cole, for the invitation. I'm coming to you today from Montevideo. I'll be headed into the metro here in a bit this afternoon, but at my house right now. And as I said, I with Southwest Initiative Foundation. We're one of the 6 Minnesota Initiative Foundations created in 1986 by the McKnight Foundation. Our region is the 18 counties and 2 native nations of Southwest Minnesota, Upper Sioux community, Lower Sioux Indian community, and our headquarters is in Hutchinson, but we basically have the counties from McLeod, Hutchinson, over to the South Dakota border, down to Laverne and the Iowa border, and over to Jackson. So just to paint a picture of our area, my lens is rural. As with many of our counterparts, I have a lot of 3-digit population communities, and that's where a lot of my hopes and dreams and thoughts are about how to serve families that have chosen our smallest communities as where they want to live and invest and prosper. Contrasting that to my largest community being Wilmer at just around 21,000. As I thought about the invitation, which again I'm grateful for, what can I say that's not a repeat of what you heard already or heard from others, but just again thinking about greater Minnesota, because we have the blessing of seeing life pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and however you want to define recovery and post-pandemic. What I said to anybody who will listen prior to the pandemic, and I'll say today still, is the 3 biggest issues facing our region's economy by far, by a big far, is childcare, housing, and broadband. Where those 3 issues converge or collide is of special interest to us, and I think it's something that we need to take very seriously. I know today the efforts, the conversation is around broadband, but just to paint a picture, childcare and housing are also topics that our communities are concerned about, that they're engaging heavily about, and we believe that those 3 issues will be the but for our community's ability to continue to attract talent, to attract business investment, and to be a place where all families prosper. As we think about, as you think about this task force and investments and things that you advocate for, I'm just sharing a few things about life right now in our region that might be relevant. I was in a meeting about an hour ago, and we were talking about our loans. We do business loans like all of our sister foundations, and I've been at our organization for about 15 years. I do believe we have the largest number of loans in the portfolio we've ever had. That's excluding all of the pandemic things. That's just regular loans. What that's telling me is that businesses want to invest. They want to expand. They want to start. Perhaps some of them are succession. So for what it's worth, as we think about the role of broadband in fostering economic development and economic mobility, I believe that loan activity, investment activity, for us at least, is at an all-time high. Some of our peers, our communities, community banks, might not say the same thing, but I think many of them would. So I think right now it's an interesting time for businesses willing to make investments, even in a inflationary or rate rise environment. Something else that really influences me and thought about it, if you all haven't seen it, IEDC prepared a white paper, it's about 40 pages or so last year. Here's the Getting Connected, how economic developers are expanding broadband access. It's free on the IEDC website. Yes, Getting Connected, how economic developers are expanding broadband. That's a real interesting paper on really narrowing it in from how an economic development practitioner looks at it. My point for bringing this up is there's a lot of Minnesota information that's presented in there. I believe Angie's quoted in this. I know that Chisago County and all the incredible leadership of Nancy Hoffman is recommended or is talked about in here. Deputy Commissioner Kevin McKinnon was involved in this. His name was in here at least once, and others. So I'd encourage everyone to take a look at that. As I think about the role of economic development folks, I'm going to jump and start with site selection. Sometimes lately that's been an interesting conversation as we think about attracting new business when we're in historically low unemployment. I have counties that are well under 2% unemployment, so you think about attracting more business. But site selection has been a core element of economic development forever. I believe my industry and the ecosystem doesn't do a very good job lifting up the importance of site selection and its relationship to broadband investments, broadband availability. And I just wanted to talk about this right now. The IEDC report lifted up the critical importance of broadband investment, broadband access and availability, but also the awareness and willing to talk about it as something that was critically important. 51% of site selectors who responded to a survey during the pandemic talked about 51% of them said their corporate clients are considering moving their operations from city centers to suburbs and rural locations. That may be obvious, you may have heard that many times, but as we think about that, the but-for making that possible is where the trifecta of childcare, housing, and broadband come together. Without adequate connectivity, that's not going to be feasible. For me and my communities with 3-digit populations, 4-digit populations, we'd love to know how urban and metropolitan investment could come out to our area, provide jobs, provide Main Street investments, and provide opportunity for the families that have chosen our region as where they would like to live. 83% of site selectors said that the remote work trend was having some to significant, between some to significant effect on site selection decisions. And IEDC felt that this was such an important topic that they made it a key part of one of their key charts in there. So as we think about the role of this, I would really love to have more voice of business, more voice of economic development, and site selection come into why this really matters. Not only with remote work, but also hybrid work styles and the ability to attract and retain talent. We all know, and the University of Minnesota has done a great job over the years doing brain gain research long before the pandemic about people who maybe were from here, moved to an urban area for education, or were never from the area before, but want to live in rural Minnesota for all the beautiful things that it provides to families and community. Broadband is critical in that, and I would, really challenge us to think about the role of this related to site selection. Another thing that this report really lifted up was increased annual sales regarding investment in broadband access. There's a joint study that the U.S. Chamber did, and they looked at a few states. Virginia is one of them they looked at. Again, I realize it's not Minnesota, but in Virginia, they felt that universal broadband access would provide at least $2.24 billion of increased annual sales and $1.29 billion of annual added value. As we think about the analytics that we need to make this case, how can we partner with chambers? How can we partner with folks to really get that critical data? And that's something on my mind from the economic development view. Putting on the hat for the day job I have at Southwest Initiative Foundation, our 10-year strategic plan is a 10-year commitment to closing the opportunity gap for children and families and for advancing economic mobility. This is not possible without affordable and reliable broadband access for all families in the most remote areas, and especially for families that are on the opportunity gap. So as we think about our region and the number of families that we have, roughly 16% of kids are in families that are below the poverty rate. We do not believe that those families can thrive without the broadband investments that DEED and others are leading. Why is this relevant to economic development? We believe that it's critical for economic mobility. It's critical for initial or increased workforce and it's necessary for the hope that our communities need for the families that have chosen to live in this region. We are, as part of that increased loan volume, we're starting to see a lot of conversations around business succession and business reinvention. One of our biggest technical assistance programs that we're looking at right now actually is a business reinvention program. What does it mean, life after the pandemic, to reinvent? A lot of those conversations with succession, retention, and reinvention have a significant digital element. But for a broadband, a lot of those goals, hopes, and dreams won't be possible. So not only was it critical before, but I think if we get into the head of the entrepreneurs who are reinventing themselves, who are thinking about their legacy, that legacy or that reinvention or that investment needs investments that we haven't thought of before in connectivity. I'd also like to shine a light on all of the amazing BIPOC families that have chosen our communities in my region, as where they want to live, where they want to raise their families, and where the families want to invest in our main streets. As I said, my largest community is Wilmer, a hair under 21,000. With the assistance of some dollars from DEED, the Economic Development Commission did a business retention study of diverse businesses. In just Wilmer alone, with a population of 20,000, they found at least 80 businesses owned by BIPOC entrepreneurs. Many of those businesses, would not be possible or would not be thriving without broadband access. So to us, it's a business attraction issue, but also an equity issue and a justice issue. We can't close the opportunity gap. We can't advance entrepreneurship without broadband access and affordability for BIPOC businesses and for BIPOC families. So doing this work in a culturally competent way, providing culturally competent digital literacy, digital entrepreneurship training is something that is very important to us. And I think it's something to think about. We are grateful that DEED hosted the forum in Hutchinson, where they convened some providers, some city folks, and some businesses about what broadband meant. And I think some critical information came out of there that really helped lift up what IEDC is talking about, that it's not just a luxury, it's not just a nice to have, it's a necessity to have. I'm just, going off script here. I think a lot of the things you read about broadband or about, more conveniences for home or faster gaming or faster this or great things for schools, and all of those things are important, don't get me wrong. I think what is still missing from some of the conversations is what does it mean for businesses to be able to thrive and for businesses to be able to grow jobs and to continue to make investments. So I would ask all of us to really drive site selection, entrepreneurship, and economic mobility into the narrative. Finally, as we think about the evolution of the Blandin Foundation Broadband Community Program, and I know Bernadine's coming on, I was honored to have served on that board for over 15 years. I don't honestly know how long it was. I started in my old job, which was over 15 years ago. And the work that was done there on feasibility, community engagement, planning, stakeholder alignment, and mobilization, it's critically important going forward. So I'm hopeful that there could be continued funds from the state or from other sources to do investments in communities, to do that work around education, digital literacy, feasibility, analysis, community engagement, and all of that work that's been done for years in collaboration with the Blandin folks. So the reason I bring that up is we're also a micro lender, very hyper-local, a lot of $500 loans, a lot of small investments. We know that broadband is, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars of need, billions of dollars of need. As we think about all of the roles that economic developers could play in community engagement and planning, it doesn't have to be two commas in that. So I am hopeful that as we fight for and advocate for the billions of dollars that are needed for investments, we're also willing to do hyper-local investments, $10,000 investments in community motivated things that help. So that's really the things I wanted to lift up from our region is, again, business investment is up. The collision with childcare and housing haunts us. Business succession, business reinvention, business transition, culturally competent TA are all things that are on our radar at a higher level than they've ever been before. Regional strategies, we believe, are critically important to this space, and we are grateful for the work that you are all doing. We are grateful for our community banks and financing partners who are willing to invest in projects, and I'd gladly take any questions, but I have hope for the future of my region. I have hope for the families that have chosen my region as where they want to live and raise their kids and thrive, and but for broadband, those dreams can't be realized.
Great. Thank you, Scott, for those remarks and for those insights. If anybody on the task force has questions, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. So, and just to get us started, Scott, I had one initial question. You said the investments and the loans are sort of an all-time high, or they're really kind of firing up on all cylinders. Can you give us a little bit of a sense of like the types of loans of which businesses going into?
We're really getting a variety, and again, let me be crystal clear, because of the cost, we're not directly funding broadband projects. I mean, I don't think you were assuming that, but we're getting a lot of retail, a lot of service, a lot of manufacturing. One of my communities of just over 3,000 people had 2 restaurant startups during the pandemic. On our board this week, we've got a brewery. We've got an ag manufacturing processing. We've got a hair salon, some retail. Just going through this in my head, honestly, it's a bit of a variety show. I think that's one of the beautiful things about our region is the diversification of the economy. But I'd say a lot of manufacturing, hospitality. People are sick and tired of being home. They're sick and tired of getting their hospitality in a house and want to get out and have human contact. So I think the hospitality industry has hope for a post-pandemic world. Main Street, some very cool stuff's happening. And the convergence of bioscience and ag in our area is really a big deal. So I think we're starting to see some stuff, popping in that space. Also, what's really fun is a lot of the social enterprises that are popping up. We're in partnership with 3 of the other initiative foundations. It's led by Central in Little Falls, but funded by the Bush Foundation and Granite Equity in Sourcewell. There's a 2-year fellowship for social entrepreneurs. I had no idea the amount of people in our region, in our area, that want to start a social enterprise. A lot of them are community centers, community areas with co-working spaces, gathering spaces, arts and culture. That's really a big deal. We're working with one right now that's doing immigration law, one that's doing indigenous arts. So I really think there's a lot of passion around social enterprise, and all of those do have a connectivity, broadband importance element to it, whether it be co-working, whether it be the marketing space. People are reinvesting in the community that they might have been born in, are coming back to. Frankly, a lot of the folks, were either from the area or from out of state, and a friend or a family member brought them to our region, and this is where they want to live. Sorry for the long answer, but I should have said that earlier. I had no clue. I'll say it till I'm, can't say it anymore. I don't think we've touched social entrepreneurship as in its potential for our rural communities. And I do believe in my heart that the pandemic has inspired the next generation of social entrepreneurs to take control of that big old building that can be something beautiful instead of the candidate for a wrecking ball, or something beautiful for kids.
Thank you. And yes, you're absolutely right. The question wasn't around funding broadband or loans towards broadbands. It was the businesses such as, like I said, restaurants. But even if you think about restaurants these days, I mean, it's the expectation that you can book a table at a restaurant or even order a takeout online and then being able to pick it up when it's ready. Hair salon, obviously big booking appointments there, but even some of the social communities, how do you get the word out as far as what's happening and when to gather and all that? I mean, that's where kind of the use of broadband becomes crucial to how we move forward and how the world has changed now because of the post-COVID expectations as well.
There's a lot of social capital that's a part of the business plans that we're seeing, and a lot of that social capital is dependent upon broadband access to do that. And on the restaurants, I forgot to say this, farm to table, local, where the food is sourced, alignment with sustainability and development goals. All of that has a broadband presence. And I just think about, the local farmers, where our food comes from, sustainability and a volatile supply chain. People want to believe in where trust where their food comes from, and they'd love to eat it on Main Street, Granite Falls, and they are now.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott Cole, you have a question?
Yeah, Scott, thank you so much for being here today. It's really wonderful to have you be a part of this group. You mentioned a stat back in the beginning about 83% of businesses looking at rural or suburban locations to find a better spot. And I'm curious how much collaboration you see happening now that maybe wasn't there before between economic developers like yourself and cities, municipalities, townships, and other civic-oriented organizations, and how critical is that partnership part of the equation to actually having it be manifest?
I think it's absolutely critical. It's really cool to see how the ecosystem, and I know buzzword, but how the ecosystem, between workforce, business, economic development, how they're doing job fairs, promotions, workforce conferences, the collaboration's strong. I still, after 22 years of doing this stuff, I still get stumped listening by my friends and peers in other states who might, have collisions or, butting up against between chambers and ED people or workforce and economic development. Honestly, I don't see that in rural Minnesota. I don't see that in Minnesota. Of course, we're going to disagree. Of course, we're going to trip over each other now and then. But those collaborations that you talked about, I think are even stronger now. This loan volume that we're talking about, many of them are collaborations amongst 2-3 lenders. We have intercreditor relationships all the time. I think it's how Minnesota does business. I believe that's part of our narrative and our brand that site selectors and need to know. Because we do things a little different in Minnesota, I think, compared to other places. I think related to your question is how community banks and credit unions invest in community-based projects. 90% of our deal flow has some type of a collaboration with a community bank, a credit union, an economic development agency, or some combination thereof.
Awesome.
I tell that story in other states, and I get blank stares sometimes. The banks here truly do want to invest. They truly do acknowledge that for many years, Main Street finance has discriminated against BIPOC populations, that yes, there has been horrible oppression and racially based discrimination in lending. What I'm seeing in the community banks and the credit unions in greater Minnesota is a passionate desire to invest, to take a chance on riskier projects and to do things. So to your point, I think that collaboration is there. Where I'd like to drive it down to is people on the street, regular voters. Many of our small communities, and I always laugh about this, you go to the co-op, you go to the cafe, there's 12, 15 often retired men drinking coffee, solving a lot of, solving problems and talking about the world. They're voters, they have power, and they're critically important members of the community. My hope and dream is that they're talking about broadband, that they're talking about housing, that they're talking about childcare. that it's not just a government problem or a business problem, it's their problem. Because
Got it.
they'll support those collaborations and they'll drive it home. So that's, again, part of my hope and dream too, is the usual suspects who are in these conversations. We need to reach a broader audience. And I do believe it's the voters on Elm Street that need to know why this matters.
Got it. Thank you, Scott.
Yvonne Caravel has a question.
Hi, Scott. Nice to see you.
Hey, Yvonne, you too.
Great presentation today. Mine kind of piggybacks a little bit off of Scott's, talk about cooperation. I know how amazingly well connected you are, and it's such a vast geographic area. It's really kind of incredible what you do. Are there cooperative opportunities that maybe others wouldn't think of, that we might not think of, that have crossed your creative brain, especially in terms of thinking about how might we help with digital literacy or just broadband access in itself? Are there cooperative opportunities that have occurred to you that maybe others aren't thinking about?
As we think about the big issues, whether it's broadband or childcare or things, and hang with me, where we, I think, see great opportunities to do collaboration or engagement, how our, adult basic education or organizations, the community colleges, a lot of this collaboration right now is happening with, in the career pathways effort, that's engaging the community colleges, ABE, chambers of commerce, economic development folks. I think some of those may be obvious, but they may be overlooked in deployment partners. Another thing I would really look at, in urban areas, one of the most critical partners for deployment of technical assistance is the faith community. We see a lot of the models we look at for entrepreneurship, a lot of those classes are handled in church basements. And that's not a denominational statement. It doesn't matter if you worship or how you worship. The faith community has access on the street to people. I do wonder, for this work, for entrepreneurship, is the faith community. We're doing an entrepreneurship education program in Wilmer right now for underserved entrepreneurs. It's based off a model we learned about in Jersey City. So very urban, very East Coast, but also very hyper-local, community-focused. Why is it relevant? The class I went to was in a church basement when I toured it. So the faith community being on the street. I was just in Chicago for 3 days looking at some economic mobility work. One of the most beautiful tours we had was an activist minister doing some amazing work in the community, and how that place was a safe gathering space to talk about it. So I think people have overlooked how the faith community, and it's not about how you worship or if you worship, but as a safe place where voices are heard, done in a dignified way, and it's just safe. So I'd really love to lift that up, Yvonne. Is that something that's been under our nose for years and we haven't thought about it? Because entrepreneurship in other states is using it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really great point. Thank you so much.
Other questions from or comments from task force members? I'm not seeing any hands go up. Well, Scott, thank you so much for making time to be here with us today. Great remarks. I think that was super helpful, and actually kind of where we're heading, even from not just recommendations or areas where we look at, right? Some of the funding is becoming available for both from the state and the federal level, but what we do with it is what's going to continue spinning that flywheel. So I think that's very critical. So with that, also, I think we'll reach out to you and get the study you mentioned, the IEDC study you mentioned. We'll get a handle of that, and then we'll make sure that in the meeting minutes when we send those out, we'll have that included. Task force has access to that as well, because I think you referenced that several times, and it looks like there's good material in there for those who haven't read it.
Yep. Thank you. Grateful for the invitation. Just two thank yous before I leave. I chair the Government Relations Committee for the Economic Development Association of Minnesota, and I'm also on the Greater Minnesota Partnership Board. And on behalf of those entities, thank you to the task force members for all you've done. It's a heavy lift, and we're grateful for the fight and the leadership you're doing. So if I could do anything for any of you, let us know. But again, I have hope, and I will continue to have hope.
Great.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. And I see Ivano also posted the report in the chat if somebody wants to access it sooner than later. Okay, so moving on to the next agenda item, as mentioned at the beginning, also wanted to make sure we allotted some time for Bernadine. I see Bernadine, you're on. Thank you for being with us. So I know you're an outgoing member of this task force, and you've been on the task for quite some time, and you'll kind of probably give us a whole historical view of sort of from when you started till now. But wanted to just obviously we'll thank you officially kind of after your remarks, but wanted to give you a few minutes to be able to address this task force about what we should be thinking about going forward, and about not just the report at the end of this year or the recommendations we make, but just future state.
Thank you, Teddy. Hello, everybody. I appreciate the invitation. So I think you heard from Teddy, and I reached out to many of you to tell you about the development that Blenheim Foundation has made the decision to sunset their broadband work. And related with that, they eliminated the program, the broadband program I'd been leading in my position. And so connection with that, I've resigned my position from the task force. I felt that it was a really important and helpful for me to have that on-the-ground experience. Scott, it was great. We got to hear from Scott this morning that Scott Marquardt talked about what's going on in communities. And I just felt like without that kind of input that it would be sort of hard or awkward for me to continue in my role. So I appreciate the chance to just say a word. I wanted to thank each of you for the collegial work that we got to do together, for your interest in the topic. I think Paul Wirtz and I maybe are, and Paul isn't here today, but I think he and I have been on the task force together from the beginning. So it has been a long run, and I'm very proud of our state and the governor for creating a task force like this. I think we've done a good job in Minnesota of setting up a set of tools or infrastructure that can advance broadband objectives based on community needs. That's what I've been really proud of our work at the task force. Things have changed a lot though now, right? We've focused in a bunch of our reports on the importance of ongoing public investment in adoption and access. And now we're sitting on a pile of resources. And I think the opportunity now for the task force is to ensure that those resources are well used. You guys have heard me over the years, what I've always kind of my note has been to try to ensure that we maximize public benefit from public investments. And I really think that's, for me, that's the big opportunity for the task force, is to ensure that our public investments benefit our communities to the greatest degree. And that's why I think we in Minnesota should continue to be ambitious in our aspirations for broadband fueled economic development. Scott Marquardt did such a terrific job of reminding us all how so I used to like to say everything's better with broadband. All the things we care about in rural and in metro communities are possible only if people can be connected to one another and to educational opportunities. So I think the task force has got a really important role now on the cusp of the big investments coming on digital equity. Yvonne, I appreciated your question about that this morning. And I would just urge the work to focus on how can we ensure that that money is well spent, and that the ways that it is spent, especially on the digital equity, is informed by community need. There's some great advocates here on the task force. Everybody's got their hat that they're wearing, that they're bringing to the table, and I'm really glad that as I move on, that there's a lot of other great advocates. Jason, I'm looking at you, and Steve, and others that live, and Dave, rural, and that I know that you will be leading with your heart and continue to ensure that those community interests are represented. So thank you. I appreciate the chance today. I don't really have a big speech or anything. Scott did a great job of reminding us of the importance of broadband to rural economic vitality. And thanks to all of you for your work. And I'll be watching you from the sidelines and cheering us on as a state. Thanks, Teddy, to you for your leadership. You've been an awesome leader for us, and there's a lot of opportunity. I'd like to echo Scott's hopeful tenor. And it was great to feel that he's hopeful about our state, and there's a lot of opportunity. And with a team like this, I'm sure Minnesota will climb back and regain our leadership role in broadband. Thanks to each of you. Thanks, Teddy.
Great. No,
onward.
Absolutely no. Thank you, Bernadine. I mean, your service has been commendable, and like you said, you've been on it from the very beginning. Established Minnesota as the model, and although we may not feel like we have a leadership position, I mean that's a statement that other states are catching up because they've been able to see sort of the lighthouse that's coming from Minnesota. Right, they're saying this is what it needs to look like, and they're pushing the envelope. So you haven't just pushed it just for Minnesota, but also for the rest of the country, which is exciting. And like you said, being there from the very beginning, kind of talking about it, talking about the importance of it, getting the funding, getting some of the projects done. And, sometimes when we take a step back, I mean, the progress that has been made is tremendous. And a lot of the credit kind of goes to the team that was there at the beginning and continuing to carry that torch forward. So you'll be sorely missed on this task force, but I'm glad to have a chance to get to know you and
yes.
for being so dedicated to this cause.
Thank you, Teddy. We've moved in the 20 years we've been doing this work from what is broadband and why should I care to when can I get it? I need mine now, and that's a huge movement. So, thanks to all of you. All the best. I'm working at the state fair this week. So if anybody wants to come on over, it's a great fair. I'm at Gate 2
on White Street.
Tickets. So. Enjoy the fair, enjoy the summer. Thanks, everybody, for your great work.
Great. Thank you, Bernadine. Okay, so let's do this. Let's take a break now. It's 10:45 almost. We'll take a 15-minute break, and let's get back together at 11, and we'll get started with Office of Broadband Development. Thank you.